this just going to be Falcons' year?
Why are they not nerfing this and this and this and this and not buffing this and this and this when it's goddamn obvious that these heroes are broken?
All right, Avery, we didn't get the time to record again when we were in Sweden, so we had to wait until we came back. We both just got back from DreamLeague, and we have a bunch of stuff to talk about, but I guess the first thing is we just came back from DreamLeague, so let's talk about DreamLeague. Let's talk about the fact that Game of Gladiators managed to get to the grand finals, and then couldn't hold a candle to Falcons. Is this just gonna be Falcons' year? They just gotta win everything?
You know, I wanted to look up the final time on that BO5. It was a little over 2 hours. They got absolutely wrecked. Like, that's a pretty stompy BO5. I thought they would put up a bit more of a fight because I feel like they'd figured a bit more out of the patch. But yeah, I mean, that begs the question. Is Falcons just going to win TI? Are they just going to win Riyadh? Are they just going to win everything? Because did this patch change enough to hurt them compared to the other top teams? If anything, it seems like they're doing better than the other top teams, at least initially. So this does beg the question, like, who is going to stop them? They gave Timbersaw another Chakram. Who is going to stop them? Like, why?
Why did they give Timbersaw
Why would they do this?
Chakram?
So I don't know. It is an interesting idea. We talked a lot about that team and how, in theory, they're susceptible to patch changes, but it seems like every time there's a patch change, it just makes them better. So,
yep.
Hell if I know. I honestly think teams just need to out-execute them. Like, people, honestly, at this point, need to stop focusing on the draft versus that team and start focusing on the gameplay. I think people are getting so sucked into, like, which of their 10 favorite heroes do we ban? And what do we let through in the first phase? And, oh, no, they got Razor or Timber. And, like, at this point, it doesn't matter. They're going to play what they're going to play. And they're playing a lot of shit that they haven't played before. They beat your ass with. Like, they'll put ATF on a Night Stalker. They'll put him on some random stun hero that you're like, oh, he can't play that. And he beats your ass with it. So at this point, you have to come up with, I want these teams to come up with some sort of gameplay stuff versus team that can at least throw them off their edge. Like, you know, maybe gank Maureen 3 times before 8 minutes. Put this guy really far back. Maybe have some sort of different carry potential versus what Skeeter is proposing. Maybe you gank ATF twice. Maybe you try and shut down their warding game. I don't know what it is. You know, I'd have to sit down and study that team a lot. It's not my job, so good luck to them. But I'm saying, like, at this point, it's not a draft thing, right? Like, this team cannot just be continuously gaining an advantage every draft, every series. I refuse to believe that's possible in Dota. And I think we saw it when they lost to XG. The drafting was not an issue. You just have to have confidence in what you're doing and outplay them at certain points in the game. So I don't know. I feel like if you're going to the TI, yeah, this team's going to be maybe the favorites, but they shouldn't be that invincible. And TI is a different beast where you have your own TI meta, and in theory, you can start to build the gameplay in a high pressure situation, which might be one of that team's weaknesses. I don't know. I hesitate to say that team has any weaknesses. I don't think they do. But, you know, ATF, the only TI he's really played at was that one with OG where he didn't do too well. So, like, maybe there's some weird thing that could happen to him. You know, maybe the hand of God comes down and breaks his arms before the group stage. But otherwise, these teams just got to get their shit together. Because, yeah, these guys are front runners right now, and it's not close. I think if you look at the 6 TI invites that came out yesterday, I think the most dubious is obviously Liquid in terms of recent results. But they probably deserve it over anybody else just from a consistency standpoint. And they had some better results earlier in the season, which I don't think you can discredit, because I think then you go back to like hella recency bias, and that has its own flaws. I think those 6 were very deserving. I think there's a very clear drop off after those. Maybe you had some flash in the pan teams, but I honestly agree with all of those. I think most people do. But if you look within those 6 teams, are those 5 beating Falcons at TI EV wise in like a BO3, 2 BO3s, or a BO5? Probably not. None of those are probably favored right now. Outside of, I will say, the one asterisk on all this is Team Spirit, because those guys are a different beast, and they are a very different beast at TIs when they're in form, as we've seen twice now.
Yeah, we've seen them getting into form. That was the one thing that was missing from DreamLeague, was the fact that they failed to get in form fast enough for the DreamLeague qualifiers. So they missed this DreamLeague and it went to Navi instead. So they were not at this DreamLeague. So this DreamLeague does have this like kind of asterisk where like Spirit, it's their own fault that they didn't qualify. But obviously by the time that DreamLeague actually rolled around, that team was obviously one of the favorites to beat out Falcons.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's a very interesting matchup. I honestly don't really know. It's like a straight 50-50, I think. But if Team Spirit are in form at TI, then they're probably favored just because they're the most beastly TI squad maybe of all time outside of the other OG. And even then, I don't know. I feel like that team has something different going on when it comes to those big tournaments, and they flip that switch. They go into another level. Like they flip the switch. If Yatoro and Collapse are on point, that team's the scariest team in the world. I still stand by that. I don't think it's actually close. I think you can look at a team like Falcons, and obviously they can beat Spirit on paper, and I think they very well could and might even be favored right now. But if Spirit flips that switch, if they figure out like the 4 or 5 heroes that are clicking for them, and then they have the flexibility on top of that, which to me is them in TI form, I'd rather play any other team in the world. I'd rather play Falcons because I feel like I have a better chance of out strategizing Falcons and therefore gaining an edge and maybe overcoming some of the young players in a high pressure situation than I do overcoming those guys. Like, I just don't know what you do versus that team when they're in form. You can't out strategize them. You can't out draft them. You can't outplay them. Where do you gain an edge? Right? I just don't see it when they're in form. They're like invincible, which is very different than all these other teams. So that is like the biggest question mark going to the TI after these invites come out, and we're going to see some qualifier action. Like those two teams to me are the two that I'm looking at.
Okay, so when you compared them to OG, I have a question which might anger some OG fans.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, I love that. Hit me.
So if comparing like best teams of all time, right? Compare Team Spirit to OG. Obviously, those two teams have won 2 TIs, right? Do you think that Spirit, when they get in TI form, they step up their game? And OG, do you think that they have a way of making their opponents play worse?
Are you saying in terms of the difference between these two teams and their peak?
Yeah. I think peak level play, Spirit steps up their own game, where OG found a way to make other teams play worse, which is a skill of its own. And I'm not saying, like, we're talking about the best teams of all time, right? They would still be one of the best teams of all time. So I'm not taking anything away from their own skill. I'm just saying when it came to TI performances, I think that they had a way to be able to tilt, to force errors out of teams, which, again, forcing errors is its own, like, skill.
I think there's some truth in that. I think there's some caveats. I think one thing, OG definitely stepped their game up at the TIs because they were dog shit all season. So how much of that is like, maybe that's just them returning to where they should have been all season, but whatever, that gap still existed for them. That's one factor. Yeah. Maybe it was larger even because they were so bad for the whole year. I think Spirit definitely, like I said, they flip a switch, they hit a different level. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the relative comparison is. But I agree their difference is less about opponents playing worse and them just going into the stratosphere. Like they just become unstoppable. Just unstoppable. We saw that last TI. They had like one of the most dominant runs to a finals ever. I think only matched by maybe Tundra's run and like Alliance or something.
And OG TI9 was very dominant as well.
Yeah. But it was just like the win streak they had from groups to that end of that tournament was just absurd. They just become unbeatable. I think OG is more beatable in the sense of like you can take games off them. They look more mortal. Like some of the games they've had at TIs where they just got beat up. Like it was like, oh, this is where they're going down, you know? But that team always wins the series. They always win the series. And the third game and the fifth game, whatever it is, like that's one of their strengths, I think, is the adaptability. And they were able to adjust very quickly within a series, which I think is a strength of a lot of top teams. I think Spirit can do that too, but maybe at their own pace, and maybe they're just better at like adjusting before the series so they don't drop that game. I feel like that's a little difference too. But I agree.
Maybe a better way to put it is OG is better at playing the team that they're matched up against, whereas Team Spirit is better at playing Dota.
I would say that. Like, I think Spirit almost doesn't care who they play against. Like, obviously they prep for the specific teams and they know what they're doing and they draft against who they're playing. And I'm sure they have some strats, but I almost feel like it doesn't matter. Like, if they're confident, they're informed, they're going to play anybody and be like, we don't care who you are. We're just going to go off and do our thing and force you to adjust to us. And OG was very good at like tilting specific opponents, banning against specific opponents, adjusting mid-series against specific opponents really fast. That's a very strong trait to have to win you tournaments, but maybe it's a bit more rocky because you do have some games in there where like you're almost losing, you're almost dropping down, you're almost getting eliminated, and you have to clutch it up. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting difference. But maybe they'll be the only teams to ever win 2 ties. Who knows? Could be Nigma though. Could be Nigma. They're in the qualifiers.
Could be. They are in the qualifiers. So we had the TI invites. It was Spirit, Extreme, Falcons, Liquid, Game of Gladiators, Bedboom. Really nothing surprising coming out of that whatsoever. You could, maybe some people would be surprised by Liquid, but these are all the teams who have made grand finals appearances at tier 1 tournaments, right? Azure Ray made it to the first tournament of the year and then switched out 3 of their players, so you can't really count that. I think that obviously is more to the favor of Extreme Gaming and inviting them than to inviting Azure Ray. So I think this year was pretty easy to decide invites. It's like everybody who made a grand finals gets to go. Yeah, that's everybody who got a chance to match up against Falcons in a best of 5.
Yeah, everybody
all
got
the
their
teams
ass
that got
beat.
to go. Yeah,
you got an invite. Good job. You got your ass beat number 1. Here's your ass beat number 2. Here's ass beat number 3. Welcome to the international. You're gonna get your ass beat again.
So, do you think it's the? Do you think the teams who have proven that they could beat Falcons have like the second and third highest EV to win TI and Riyadh? Just because Falcons is so favorited that at that point, if Falcons is the final gatekeeper, then it requires a team that can actually beat them. Like Bedboom, despite being one of the invited teams, may be like lower
I think,
percent than maybe some invited teams, just because they've failed against Falcons so many times.
I honestly might give Bedboom the lowest EV to win of any of those teams. Like, I'm not kidding. I just think their probability to get into the top 6, I think, is very high. But their probability to get first at TI or first at Riyadh, I think, is just abysmal at this point. Obviously, there's some block. And
they have a block when it comes to first place, and they have a block when it comes to beating Falcons. So you're double
you're just screwed. You need like really good bracket luck. I mean, they got to the grand finals. I think it's very obvious that when they get to a grand finals, they get to top 3, that they get a bracket that's better for them. And then when they meet that team that has the good matchup for them, they just can't get past it. So you can get some bracket luck at some of these big events. It's possible. But it's not something you want to go in relying on. And even then, like, I feel like that team has had some other issues at these super high pressure events too. Like, I don't know if they necessarily step up as opposed to sink a little, or where that exactly is. I almost have more faith that Liquid would get like higher than them at TI right now. And that's saying a lot, because I don't think Liquid's in good shape at all. I think
it is actually really funny that 2 of the invited teams are like incredibly low percentile of winning the event.
Yeah, I don't think Liquid's going to win TI. I don't think they think they are. I mean, maybe they do, but I think that's just, you're going to have internal confidence, whatever. That's the right thing to do. But from a statistic standpoint right now, like, from my gut read, there's no way. That team is obviously not clicking. I think there's a world where if they weren't as big a team as they were, and they didn't have as much faith in the process and the org and all of that has worked for them in the past, which they should. Like, let's say they were a tier 3 team, they would have kicked somebody by now.
Yeah.
Now, they wouldn't be in the position they were in the first place. So it's kind of an irrelevant hypothetical, but I'm saying I think their results have been very frustrating for them based on what they expected and what they expect from themselves. So that's the spot they're in. Very tough spot to be in when you're going into big tournaments like that, unless you click and that you get that magic run. I don't know what that team's going to do, honestly. And we've seen them in those positions before. And if you remember, what got Liquid out of those positions before?
I don't.
They changed captain and drafter. That's their ace up the sleeve. They were about to be eliminated from that season without even going through those the close qual, last chance, whatever. They made Matu captain and drafter. Salvage that entire fucking season with a single decision. Right? But can you do that on this team? Probably I don't think you can. There's nobody to switch it to, right? So you don't have that like random veteran player you can just hope clutches it out and gives you that miracle run with new ideas and new direction and confidence that people have in him. That is supposed to be 33 on the squad. It has to be him. They're kind of stuck in their position, so they have to just figure it out. There's no.
I know Mickey has done drafting for them before, but as far as like captaining wise, that's especially
no way.
Yeah.
No way that guy is captaining you to TI victory. Like maybe in 5 years, but not right now. There's no way. That guy has way too much shit to figure out of his own gameplay and focus on. And he's supposed to be your star player. And if the second you burden your star player or whatever with that, you just hurt yourself even more. Like it would be a terrible decision. It's pretty much only 33 Insania. And, they removed it from Insania before for a good reason and it worked for them. So it's pretty hard to go back that direction. Very tough spot to be in, which is again why I favor these teams like Spirit and Falcons and Gaiman even, because they already have the structure that has worked for them and is still working in terms of the leadership, the drafting. We did see Gaiman switch it actually for this tournament.
Yeah, I was about to say Gaiman Gladiators made a switch, right, to Tofu drafting.
Right, which did salvage this tournament for them because they were doing dog shit before. And again, that switch can be powerful. I don't think it ends up working ultra long term. I think it gives you that initial oomph and it fixes some stuff. And then you have to figure out why it fixed certain stuff. And that either improves you long term or it doesn't. But you can't just be like, oh, we're automatically better now. Like, Gaiman is not going to be able to rely on Tofu drafting for them when it comes to TI and Riyadh, unless they really figure out what changed and why what changed is better for them, which is really difficult. Really, really difficult. So they kind of already pulled that change to try and fix what's going on with them. And it did to a certain degree. But do I have faith in that to like work over the course of a super long event? I have no idea. That's another big gamble for me, which is, again, I think why Spirit and Falcons are just way above everybody going in this year, because they are not going to have to worry about any of this shit. They have confidence. They've won big events this year. They've won big events in the past. Both those squads have TI winners on them, TI winning coaches on them, a solid org behind them that they're not going to be like pressured. If those teams don't win TI, those orgs are fine already with the performance they've gotten out of those teams. That is just a very good position to be in, and a very difficult one to upset unless you are like a dark horse coming in. And I don't know how many dark horses we're going to have at this TI, because I mean, who is even like making a run right now? I just Enigma, I guess. Enigma Galaxy making a run.
So we do have the qualifiers are going to be coming up in about 2 weeks. We're going to start off with China and North America on June 9th. And then it's going to be Eastern Europe and South America, then Southeast Asia and Western Europe. So those are all going to be going on. The resulting slots per region is as follows. There are 5 Western European slots, 3 for Eastern Europe, 3 for China, 2 for Southeast Asia, 2 for South America, and 1 for North America, because the North America go-to invite has finally sunk low enough that they no longer get invited to these things. So
yeah, and you can't even argue. Like,
no,
I'd give that region 0 slots if there was a world where that made any sense, but obviously it never will. Like, goddamn, that region has been absolutely atrocious. Like,
yeah,
they just haven't done anything on LAN in like a year and a half. So how can you justify anything beyond that? You can't. Even some of these SA teams like Boom or whatever, look at top 8, like Walachi or something, right? They show some promise. God, NA is just garbage. So, yeah, deserved. They're going to have to fight for the 1 slot, and whoever gets that is honestly probably not going to do much, but maybe we'll do something. Maybe we'll get a top 8 or whatever. Mind controlled the Shopify Rebellion.
Yeah, I was going to say it's going to come down between Nouns and Shopify Rebellion. And Shopify Rebellion have made their roster switch up because, as you said, have not done enough on LAN to warrant anything. So they made another swap. Saberlight left the team. Sounds like he didn't get kicked, but he actively left the team.
I don't know about that one. I mean, he got kicked. Let's be honest. He got kicked. That guy's just too nice to say it like that. But okay. You put someone in a position where they feel like they have to leave. you kick the guy. I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's effectively a kick. They're just not doing it to his face or whatever. I know that maneuver. That's a goddamn NA classic, you know? So whatever.
So this is
whatever.
This is something that he said that he, like, play wise was clashing with one of the players on the team. So pretty much everybody has locked this down to being Arteezy, possibly Kittrack.
It honestly doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. Like, it's just the 20th offlaner to go through the offlaner machine. They're going to have another one. Another 3 months, they're going to kick him. Like, it's obvious who the issues revolve around in this team, and it's not going to change. So whatever, it is what it is by now. I'm over it. Honestly, I'm over it. I expect nothing, and I'm still disappointed. But that's how life works. I have absolutely no faith in the leadership mechanisms of that team anymore. And I think if you do, you're an absolute fool. And if you're going in that team, you absolutely should know what you're going into and have no naivety about, I'm going to be the guy who changes it after the previous 20 all-star offlaners couldn't. Get the hell out of here, man. Like, whatever. You want to go there, get paid, play with some good players, maybe learn some stuff. Awesome. You know, I think that's a good opportunity. Doesn't mean there isn't still value in that team for like a guy like
seems
Saberlight.
Like that's what Saberlight initially took.
I think that's fine for him.
As an opportunity to learn.
You know, he probably learned a lot. He made a lot and got opportunities at big lands. By no means is that valueless, but if you're going in there like, I'm going to win TI with this squad, I mean, I don't.
He even had a great performance on lane. Sure. It wasn't with Shopify, but
that's what I'm saying, dude. It's like you're just a farm team at this point, so.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, it is what it is, but I would not be surprised to see them not make this TI. I think there's a real chance Nouns knock them out of it because I don't think MC is a good fit for that squad at all. I don't know. I mean, they're probably selecting from a limited pool of offlaners that are left at this point in the season.
Yeah.
And he is definitely probably the best they could have gotten. But is he going to fit with Arteezy and Bulba? No.
Okay.
No, he's not.
Why not? Why not?
I mean, this guy plays European Dota. He's like one of the most active European offlaners. He wants to go do shit. And that team is slow as goddamn balls. So they're not going to do shit. And he's going to get frustrated.
But wouldn't you want an active core to offset the slowness?
Oh, I'm like having pains in my neck thinking about this shit, dude. This is the paradox of the Shopify Rebellion /EG leadership forever. They know what they need, but they're unwilling to yield to it. That's the inevitable problem. You know, they know the type of person they need to bring in. They need a strong captain. They also know the type of offlaner they need to bring in. It's a guy who's a space maker and is going to make plays and make shot calls and help them with the strategy. And they consistently,
sounds like mind control.
And they consistently bring these people in. And guess what happens? They don't listen to them. And then they kick their ass. And then they're back where they started. And they do it again. Like, you have to, you know, there was a good quote I saw. It might have been on Reddit. I don't know where it was. It was a perfect quote for this team. Some guy, I don't know, he's out there. Shout out to him. He said, like, that team doesn't need more leaders. They need more followers. And that is 100% fucking true. The guys on that team need to shut the hell up and pick somebody to follow and actually follow them. You know, how many times have they kicked their captain, bring him back in, kick him again? Like, who's in charge of this team? The people in charge of this team and the roster decisions and the org and all of that are not the people who are put in charge of the Dota. So it inevitably just comes to this, and then the guy who gets kicked is the guy in charge of the Dota. So they're just in this revolving door scenario, and that's going to be MC. He's going to come in, they're going to tell him, we believe in you. You go shot call, you help us with the decisions, blah, blah, blah. He's going to do that for a month. And the second there's problems, they're going to fall back to like, I don't know if it's working out. We need to play more how Arteezy and Bulba want to play. And then you're just stuck in the same situation. And anybody who denies it at this point hasn't looked at like the last 6 years of this team playing. That's all I'll say on this. I'm done with this topic. I never want to talk about this team again. They're the most frustrating pool of talent I've ever seen in Dota. They have an entire fucking free region to do whatever the hell they want with for 7 years. Basically infinite amount of money. Infinite amount of talent pool, and they can't do shit with it. It's insane, dude. It's insane. Like, you know, I made it to a major finals with like a 20th of the resources this team had after they kicked my ass. Like, come the hell on, dude. You know, there's just no point. There's nothing left in terms of excuses. And the reason it's so frustrating is because, like I said, it's an entire region. There's nothing really to fall back on in NA in terms of resources, large org, the experience, the veteranship, the talent. They have it all. They just can't do anything with it. So, I mean, good luck, Commander Mind Control. I wish you the best. I'll see you back in Europe in 3 months. I hope you can. Nothing on him. I think he's an amazing player. I love watching Mind Control. I think he can add a huge amount of value to a team. We've seen it over and over again. My issue is not with MC. The issue is not with MC. Is what he's walking into. The ultimate goddamn bear trap of all time.
Have you heard of the term orphan crushing machine?
No. What the hell is that from?
It's like an internet meme. Anyway, that's Shopify Rebellion is the offlaner crushing machine.
Yeah, 100%. As someone who's been there and has done that to a much more minor degree, I understand how you get stuck in that cycle, and they are stuck in it and unlikely to get out. Very unlikely to get out. But Yopaj just looked great. That guy's amazing, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So it turns out it wasn't Jabs. No, Jabs not going over there.
I don't even think Jab's crazy enough to do that shit. You mean Abed? Wasn't Abed?
Oh yeah, Abed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Ain't no way that guy's going back.
I mean, at least they didn't take at least they took an actual offlaner.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Props to them. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe they'll have some miracle honeymoon run. Do something crazy. Shut my ass up. I look forward to it. Prove me wrong,
Speaking of TI, I just want to add a little note here that the wording of the announcement where they talk about, so once again, we're going to be doing this split where there is the group stage into a 5-day playoff. And they say immediately followed by the 5-day playoffs, a studio production that will run through Tuesday, September 10th. So it looks to me like they're taking away the audience for the playoffs.
Yes, that was my assumption. So you're only going to be 3 days with an audience at TI?
Yep. That is what we're looking at here.
Pretty brutal, honestly, for a lot of the fans. I know that a lot of those days early on in the playoffs don't fill the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So from like a TO logistics perspective, it's waste resources and doesn't look that good on a stream sometimes and whatever. So I can fully understand pushing it that direction and just making sure you have 100% max capacity for those 3 days. It looks amazing. Everybody's super hyped, right? Makes sense to me. But I think it is kind of sad because there's still a lot of people who watch those other days and go there and enjoy the festivities. And like, yeah, maybe you're at 50% capacity, but that's still a lot of people. That can still be 10,000 people or whatever. And I think it's still...
Yeah, I think Singapore was pretty full for that playoffs bit, but Seattle...
It was a smaller room. That was a smaller room, though, to make sure that...
It was a smaller room.
Which is something you can do, but then you have to have 2 venues and the complications that come with that. I would have wished they'd done a couple more days. I don't know if you have to do all of it, but I feel like 4 or 5 days in a venue is like just way nicer than the 3. I also think it's just nice for the teams. Like, you work all year to try and go to this TI. If you make it to the main stage, you'd like to be able to play on the main stage in front of a crowd. Like, that's a unique experience. It's really fun. One of the best things I've ever done in my life, honestly. Win or lose. It's kind of sad that a lot of teams will not get to experience that to the same degree or at all, if that's actually the case. But of course, what can you do? Esports is in a rough spot. They're trying to maximize the value they're getting out of one of the best tournaments left in the entire scene. And I can understand the logistical decisions, even if I don't personally like them. Yeah. What can you do? I don't know. Sad times.
Well, I guess the final thing to talk about then is we already have an 8 patch. Valve pumping out the content, man. We're right in the middle of this like cavern crawl system. They dropped 736 and pretty quickly they run a 736A, which I almost wonder if they were putting it off until after DreamLeague had finished, because they dropped it almost immediately after DreamLeague, which tweak some things. I mean, obviously, when you make a change like the facet system, you're putting in some broken stuff. So that you have to be pretty quick on being able to tweak it. But I did think the turnaround here was pretty impressive. Fixed a lot of bugs, but then also did a balance change for mostly for one facet or the other, or buffing up a hero that was pretty miserable to play. I think the Tinker players, for example, I saw an On the Night buff that I was like, yeah, that hero did feel really bad to play around its Hammer of Purity because it no longer has the extra range. That felt really bad. They buffed up the Pango shield crash because obviously that wasn't working for him. And then nerfed some other stuff that was definitely standing out on the patch as being mega broken. Like Legion Commander. No, she only gets 50% of the damage done. That is such a drastic A change. That has to be one of the bigger like A balance changes I've ever seen. That is a big number change from 100% to 50% of the damage done, which obviously goes to show that that hero was very broken with 100%. Yeah.
That was just a numbers broken thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing about these to me is I think what Valve's doing is quite good for the game. I don't think anybody's denying that at this point. The game is obviously being pushed in a good direction in terms of the gameplay. We've discussed 100%. The viewership issues that potentially come with that, but something you can iron out over time. Hopefully it'll be good for this TI. That's like pretty much all you can hope is just the gameplay is fun for the viewer at TI, because I think that is a big deal. But it's obviously fun to play. We played some of this patch. I had a lot of fun. I think the systems are really cool. Gives them a lot of room to make heroes different and make the heroes' playstyles different within the hero itself, which I think is pretty nice and something they wanted to do for a long time that they finally figured out how to do in like a good, balanceable way. I don't think many people have issue with the mechanics and that stuff, but I have heard a lot of complaining in the last year or so from pro players about the speed at which the pro meta is tuned. So I raised this question. You
think that Valve is too reactionary to what is succeeding in professional matches?
The opposite. The general consensus among the pro scene is that Valve is very slow at bouncing the pro scene. And when they do, it's very bad. Now this, not my opinion, just for record. This is the general pro opinion.
I'm just reporting the facts here.
Yeah, I'm just reporting the facts. But this is a very strong consensus I hear from a lot of people that it's, the general idea is like, what the fuck is Valve doing? Why are they not nerfing this and this and this and this and not buffing this and this and this when it's goddamn obvious that these heroes are broken and these are bad in the pro scene? It takes watching one tournament to realize this. Why can't they just tune these things? Why does it take so long? Why, like the old patch, why does it take 8 months to nerf Chen when he's first pick for 8 months? This patch, why is Timbersaw not touched when he's obvious first pick and just destroying pro games and has way too much damage? This is like the opinions I'm hearing. And it makes me think, I've always thought, is this actually the case? Because obviously pros are going to overreact. They're especially going to overreact when they're in the middle of a pro meta tournament that they're winning or losing on, and they feel like things are broken, even if they're not necessarily. They just haven't figured out the answers. Yeah. We can look at this tournament and say Timbersaw is broken, but we don't really know. It's very hard to tell initially. You can have a gut read. You can feel like the numbers are overtuned. You could tune them back a bit and probably not hurt too much. But my point is these opinions are very reactionary, and they're from players who are very emotionally invested in the reactionary effect of these changes because it might hurt or help them or hurt their opponents.
How long have you been hearing about this?
A long time. A very long time.
Over a year?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we could probably say for the last 8 months, I would give Valve the excuse of they were working on this big patch, right?
Sure. I think it's fair.
When you're working on a really big patch, I have to imagine you don't really care that much about tweaking the patch. They got all the way to a D patch, right? We got a D patch on that one point in time where everybody expected, or people did expect a patch was going to be dropped, and it wasn't a big patch; it was a small one, right? That there was probably some of that, like, okay, we have to do a D patch, but like, really, we just want to focus on this whole facet system and flesh that out. But if we go further than like 8 or 9 months back, you're talking about like last year's competitive meta. Yeah, that's maybe there is something to that. I would say with the big patch, probably I guess this will be the real test, right? Of like, Valve is obviously going to pump out patches faster because it is a bigger patch. So they have to get things to a relatively even point. But once we kind of get there, once we get past the B or C patch, we'll see how quickly Valve reacts to the things that are quote unquote broken in the professional scene.
So
do they think that Valve is balancing more for pubs than pro matches?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's true at this point. I think over the last year they have done, I feel like almost 90% of the work has been towards the general Dota audience, which is good, and I agree with, and is totally fine. But pro players get upset about that, right? Because they're like, I'm stuck banning Chen for a year, blah, blah, blah. So the thing is, in the post that they released, I thought the wording was interesting because they said, now it's time to turn our eyes back to the pro scene. That was in that TI Copenhagen release statement, right? If you remember that little line in there, we've been working on a bunch of stuff for the general Dota audience, Crownfall and the patches and the cavern crawl and, bug fixes and all of this stuff. And that's all for you. And now we're going to go to the pro scene for like whatever month or whatever that means and like focus on them, which who knows what that means. But it obviously tells you that their focus has been on the general gameplay and the general public and getting the player base numbers up and all of that, which is working and is all great and way more important to the game than the pro scene. Now, my question is, and the more I thought about this, is there value in having somebody at Valve or more focus or whatever that's a very minimal component on just tuning hero numbers, not changing the hero, but just tuning the numbers based on competitive tournaments to provide increased variety in the next tournament just for viewers' enjoyment? So what I mean by this is you watch an event and you don't go and change the entire game based on that event, right? You're not going to go in and change heroes to nearly the degree you do in a normal letter patch or whatever, or change spells or whatever. But like, you watch this last event, Falcons are first picking Timbersaw. It becomes first pick, first ban hero for the rest of the tournament, right? It has like 90%, 95% contest rate, just as an example. Do you look at that and be like, all right, let's just nerf the Twisted Chakram by 20% damage? Something that is, yeah, it will have a larger effect on the general pub scene, but no general player is going to be like, the average Dota player is not even going to notice that change.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, it might reflect in the win rate, but I feel like it's not something they would change compared to like they add a facet or they do this, right? But for the pro scene, it might be enough to tune the hero just a little bit that like you can do more, right? Maybe we'll tune up a hero that isn't played at all for the pro scene, right? Like Bloodseeker wasn't picked that much, but he's like kind of viable. All right, we'll give him like 3 more base damage or something, right? Is there any value in doing that just for the pro scene, just so that you try and make tournament to tournament greater variety than some of the instances we've had where you have Chen banned or picked for 6 months in a row? Just proposing the question. I don't know. It's just an interesting thought.
Is it worth it?
Yeah. Is there enough value there for the general Dota community? Because obviously doing something to cater to like 100 dudes who are all making $1 million a year, kind of irrelevant, to be honest. They're not going to like to hear that, but it's irrelevant. I'm not going to cater to them if I'm making my game better. But if it increases variety and difference between tournaments, and there's going to be a lot of tournaments in the next year, right? There's going to be a lot of them. If you can do that and it makes the viewer experience better and ups the viewership for Dota, isn't that also something that's generally good for the community? You're going to bring more people back into the game. They get less of stale watching a meta. I don't know. I don't know how much that viewership bleeds into people playing. Probably not a lot. But it might just be something that's good for the community as well and might require minimal effort compared to like the big bounce or even letter changes, because you're just going in and being like, this hero had 98% contest rate, 10% damage nerf or whatever, right? I don't know about that philosophy, but
my answer is it worth it? There's a couple of factors here. One, I think Dota 2 is one of the games out there that probably has one of the largest percentages of the overall player base to esports watchers. I think there is a much higher percent of Dota players who watch esports than many other games. So that makes it value, right? I will say that other things such as you have a battle pass system that you are making money off of about the competitive scene. Now, how much you're actually getting compared to your overall revenue, all that sort of thing, but you are making some money. Valve is making some money directly off of the competitive scene being good and interesting to watch, right? any other developer, those two factors, I would say, yes, 100% it's worth it. 100%. Absolutely. Is it worth it on a Valve on a Valve employee's salary? Then maybe not.
Yeah, probably not. I don't know. It's just an interesting
But I think
idea.
if we're talking about Riot or something, I'm like, yeah, 100%. That would be worth it.
Yeah, you know, you would just have a guy,
some guy $60K a year to do that. Sure.
He's like you have a community manager or something.
Yeah.
Valve also has never had. But you just have one guy who's like the competitive tuner, right? And he just recommends small number changes to try and increase variety of turns. That's it. Just an idea.
Those two, roles work together to create content of like, hey, here at Valve, here's what we're doing with this next patch. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm referencing what Riot does. Riot actually does. I'm not saying this is actually good or bad. I just think it's interesting. They actually have a well-known personality who is the lead of their esports team or balance team, rather. Excuse me, not esports team. Their balance team. And they put out videos of like, hey, here's our thought process of what we're doing with this next balance change and why we're doing that. And they have a similar philosophy with like, I know Team Fortress's main guy is like very active about like explaining their ideas and stuff like that. I'm not saying developers should do that by any means. It's just interesting the difference in level of communication in that regard.
I mean, the other reason it's interesting is because this is the direction that the Dota team has gone in the last year. The direction they've gone is to be more transparent, is to engage more with the community, and to make a game that the community likes. That's their primary objective right now. They forsook all of the nonsense in the battle pass revenue generation and took a loss on that. Yeah, to them, which was a lot of bullshit, and went to the general community. But part of that general community is still the professional scene. Like, I don't think you can just 100% ignore it. Not that they do. They obviously bounce these patches, taking into account the competitive scene. But if you have 20 tournaments next year, at the rate that these patches come out, like, it's not close enough to update the game relative to how fast these pro teams develop the meta. It's just not. They develop it so fast now and they lock it in. Like, you're going to have a hero within one tournament that just becomes first phase, first ban. And it's just stuck there for like another 5 months. And you can argue, well, teams should just get good at countering this shit, but teams are better at figuring stuff out and making it even more broken too. Like, that goes both ways. So I don't know. I almost think you're at a point where like you would want this role to exist. I don't think it will. I don't think they're going to do it, but it would be interesting because I actually think there's.
Are you trying to put in your resume for it?
No, just. I mean, if they want to hire me, my email's open. They know how to reach me. They know. But I'm just saying. I think a lot of times pro complaints are kind of nonsense, but I think in this area it is actually interesting in terms of doing it to create value for the viewership in the community, because some of these tournaments in the last year were pretty stale from a viewer standpoint, not just because of this, but like we talked about some issues with the just being a casual viewer and watching the games, but something that can alleviate those problems is just if you're seeing different heroes all the time, or pros trying to figure different things out. I, again, don't know how much these tuning patches would make that happen, but, if we
you can even have just a placebo effect, right? Of like a team thinking that a hero is more viable because of this change, and they pick it and they realize they can win with it.
Yep.
And they think it's better. Then it turns out it was better than they thought it was even before the change.
Yeah, right? It's like the boogeyman effect, right? These heroes just become the boogeyman, where like Chen's unbeatable. Nobody can do anything against Chen. And then you like -1 armor, and then people let him through, and then suddenly they realize you can beat him, and he wasn't that broken all along. But the hero just stays in that slot forever because pro players are stubborn and they're not willing to take the risk. So these tuning patches can sometimes just open, like you said, these placebo or boogeyman effects up, and just change it based on variety regardless. Which I think is interesting for like a tournament to tournament basis if you had a role that did that, but we're probably not going to see it, but I think it'd be an interesting trajectory because I do think, like, I don't think these things have to be at odds with each other. I feel like there's a sentiment within gaming right now, not just Dota, where like you can either make the game good for the casual dude or make the game good for the pro, but you can't do both. Like, I don't know where this comes from.
I mean, okay, to be fair, it does apply to certain heroes, right? Pango was a great example. They had to fully change that. They're trying to change that hero to be more about shield crash because they found that swashbuckle is impossible to balance for the pro and pub scene.
So I understand where it comes from. I shouldn't have said that. Like, there are definitely these instances where Valve are trying to accomplish both. They're trying to make the hero viable in the pro scene, but also viable for the casual player, which is the right way to do it. Very complicated, takes a lot of time. I respect that. But I also think there's like this sentiment of just, I don't know, like what's good for one is bad for the other. You know, like if we try and make DPC circuits and something that's good for like TOs and sponsors, then it's bad for the viewers. And if we try and make something that's good for the viewers, there's too many tournaments and it burns out players, right? We've had that in past years. And then people don't want to play. They just want to play TI. And if we like devalue the prize money at TI, that's like bad for players, but it could be good for viewers because then other TOs come back. Like, it's always these trade-offs. And I know that's how a lot of life works, and that's probably the case here. Like, everything is generally a trade-off. So I don't really know where I'm going with this. I would just like it if these things weren't as like antagonistic in the discussion, I guess. You know? Like, yeah, you're gonna have to make trade-offs, and sometimes things are gonna go up and others are gonna go down or whatever. But like, I don't think it comes from a standpoint of we're trying to fuck these guys. I feel like it's a case. Like, pro players are sitting there like, Valve's trying to fuck us because they're all they're doing is caring about the average guy in his game. They don't care about us anymore. It's like, that's a little disingenuous, you know? But at the same time, there's been some stuff of like, the pro players have had it too good and we don't want to work. We don't want to have, you know, Valve basically just said, fuck competitive Dota. We're out of it. I don't think they had to go that far either, right? Like, I don't think these things are just 100 or 0. And maybe from their perspective, they tried all the in-betweens and they didn't work, so now it is 100 to 0. But I don't know. I feel like when you can interlace these things and make them push towards the same end goal, which is make Dota the best game in the world and everybody enjoy playing and watching it, and there's a lot of factors that go into that, and when you make all of those factors that go into it as good as possible, my gut is that you're going to end up with the best product. You know, like, even if you don't want to make the pro scene good because you want to make Dota the best game, making the pro scene good will in turn make Dota a better game. Part of me believes it. So you can't just say, fuck the pro scene entirely, we're going to make the best game. I don't think you'll end up with the best game if you just fuck the pro scene entirely. So,
sure. Like, the game needs to be the best it can at the highest level of play for people to want to aspire to play at that kind of level, right?
It makes it more interesting. Like, it has some trickle down effects. It has all these like brackets are connected to each other. I don't think it's as disconnected as people think, even if the direct value isn't as tangible. Like, you know, what is the direct value the pro scene's giving us? It isn't that tangible. And I'm sure Valve have measured it like, we don't need to sell cosmetics based on the pro scene. We can just sell them based off an event. Yeah, 100%. I don't think pros sell these things, right? But no. I think it does have these intangible effects on people's interest in the game and wanting to play it and seeing people play it at the highest level. Like, you can't tell me that there's not some effects here. Like, you can't tell me 100%. Kids watching the NBA aren't going to want to play basketball more because they're watching these dudes crush the fucking NBA, right? That's just how these things work.
Yeah, you go into a game aspiring to play like the people that you watch, right? Kobe. Right, exactly. Like that is a thing. You want to go and so get it stuck on the cliff. Arteezy, you know, it's just
exactly.
It's yeah, and basically I think that people go into the playing Dota and they have two different like goals. Basically, one kind of person has a goal of making something really weird or broken or something, you know, like something that is wholly unique. Oh, I'm going to get this like Spirit Breaker. My bud's going to play Spirit Breaker for the other facet that amplifies push movement abilities. And then I'm going to play reverse polarity Bagdis, right? And I'm going to shoot that guy 2,000 units into our fountain, right? Like people just like, they come up with silly shit like that to try and make work. We're gonna do that, by the way, just so you know.
But I'm not gonna do that, but Godspeed.
And that's one, and then the other one is playing like the best level of Dota that they've seen. I think that is actually one of the biggest downsides of Dota is that like its highs are so high that you conceptually, when you think of like playing Dota, you think of what those highs look like, and you think like, that's what I'm gonna do in the game, and then you just go into the game, and there is a very different outcome, right? But you're still chasing that 10% of games where you do hit something similar to that high that you've seen, right? That other people are able to replicate all the time in their regular games. And that's why people think in their heads like, oh, if I just get out of Herald, you know, I'll finally be able to do the great things that I've seen other people do. If I just make it to Immortal, you know, then the games will just magically be what I want them to be, which is the highest level of play that I've seen. And I'll be able to take part in that success level of what I see other people succeed.
Yeah, I think there's value in that. I think there's a lot of stories, a lot of interest, a lot of internal thought that the pro scene generates that are the intangibles that you can't really measure, but that contribute a lot to people's interest and continuing interest in the game, their nostalgia for the game, their willingness to come back to the game, right? These things add up in your community. And I think that can coincide with making the game as good as possible. I think, in fact, it does. Like, making the game as good as possible for the pros will make the game better for other people and make it more interesting and wider variety. And I think that is probably Valve's goal. I'm not saying they're not working on this, but I don't think it necessarily has to be like, you know, I don't think we need to give players all $10 million a year with like $50 million TI. I don't think that necessarily contributes to these things. But just having tournaments that have interesting games with cool series and cool storylines is just nice, right? I don't want to go into next year with 20 lands that are lined up right now, that are a lot being announced, and we don't have patches that change the competitive meta for like 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will be bad for the game, even if they're doing all this other stuff, right? And I don't think those things are antagonistic. I don't think you can only have one or the other, is my point. Okay,
Avery, I'm going to cut you off there, because I'm pretty sure Tundra and our editor are going to kill us for what is currently my recording has been going on for 53 minutes. These podcasts are supposed to be 10 to 20 minutes. We've never quite achieved that. So we're going to close it out here. Last time I said, you know, hey, we'll come into the next podcast and talk about like our top 5. To be honest, we haven't gotten to play nearly as much Dota as you guys have at home, because we've been busy working DreamLeague and then traveling. So next episode, Avery and I will have enough pubs in, I think, that we can probably do like a top 5 sort of thing. So especially now that we have the 8 patch as well. So thank you for watching Not for Broadcast. We'll see you guys next time.